And then I explain it to people, and they like, and many people have told me like, this is what you're supposed to be doing. You know, this show is you. So I want it to be, you know, part of the reason I do the show is to inspire, is to motivate, is to have these types of discussions. And if you can see, and you know, this comes from the psychology, you can be what you see.
Whatever you heard of me ain't worthy to me. I'm just too cutthroat, verbal surgery. How you claim to know thyself when your shelf's too high? I keep mine's at eye level. What you trying to hide?
Peace, 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 beautiful family. This is Dr. Walter Hidalgo, and this is the Know Thyself. I'm gonna start calling it show. I don't know if I want to call it a podcast because somebody dropped some gems because it's deeper than the pod. But I'm gonna say, welcome to the Know Thyself. And this is, I don't know what episode we're in. It's pretty sad of me, but that's okay. Good. It's somewhere out there, and we're grateful. And the Know Thyself podcast utilizes the metaphor of the shelf to extrapolate the self. And the way we do that is we invite guests to come on and share something about themselves. And before I introduce my guest, I just want to say shout out to all our subscribers, our viewers. Thank you to everyone that continues to support, give feedback. We're living an interesting time, family, and I'm so grateful and humble that y'all are accompanying, you know, us on this journey, and the brother I have here with me is going to add to that conversation. Facts. But you know, as we always do, I want to shout out our sponsors. So I want to start up with shopvalero.com. Check out their accessories. They got dope glasses, watches. Use the promo code SHELF25 to get a 25% discount. I also want to say, if you want any workshops, if you need someone to coach your kids, holla at me. We do all that stuff. Just go to knowthyselftv@gmail.com. Shoot me an email and we can talk specifics. And I also want to shout out something I haven't done in a while, because 2021 will mark 10 years that I wrote my book, Beyond the Four Walls, The Rising Ministry and Spirituality of Hip Hop. And you know, that thing changed my life. Because anytime you bring the God into the conversation, it's going to take you on a journey, but you know, just prepare for it, the good and the ugly, but it's all beautiful. So if you want to know why, how is hip hop spiritual, I definitely recommend you check out the book. All right. With that being said, the other thing we do is we always like to shout out a group of individuals. And today I want to give a big shout out to all my hood intellectuals. You know, that's why I really do believe we're living in the age of enlightenment and information. I'm learning a lot about people that I like from far. And, you know, some of them are whack, as DJ J. Ronan said in one of our podcasts, but a lot are really amazing, man. We're just learning from each other, the stories, right? And what we see on the surface is one thing, but when you dig deeper, it's a whole other conversation. Shout out to the hood intellectuals. Shout out to all the orators. People who just like to speak. This art form of articulation is real deep. I want to shout out to all my investigative journalists. The people that keep, you know, the art of Q&A, the art of rhetoric is really beautiful, man. And it's a gift. And I say that because today I got somebody that I love, that I respect, that I've known for a minute. And I got introduced by the God. So this is the God I got with me here, my brother Legacy.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for having me. Wow, I got shivers and, you know what I'm saying, chill down the spine from that intro. Thank you, man. I appreciate you. I love you too. I think what you're doing is a beautiful thing. I'm humbled to be here with you tonight. So I appreciate you for having me. I look forward to our discussion. We've already started a little something.
You know what I mean? It's all part of it. Because, all right, so gotta put this into context, because I met the God Legacy probably the same time I met 13. Maybe even the same day, I want to say.
Okay.
But I met you through the circuit of Adriel, Steve,
Yes.
you know, doing what they do. 13, shout out to all my brothers. Shout out to Steve and his 2020 collections. Shout out to 13 for It's Made for Kings. Right. And we're definitely going to get into the conversation with the work that you're doing.
Yes, sir.
If we were to step into, as I always say, Bill and Ted's time machine and go back into a younger legacy, what would we see? What would we hear? You know what I'm saying? So you are originally from?
I am originally from, I was born in Brooklyn.
BK all day. Shout out to my Brooklyn people.
Shouts to, well, let me take a couple steps back. Shouts to the island and Republic of Trinidad and Tobago.
Oh, shout out to the Twin Islands, yo. Shout out to my people. Yo, I went out there, beautiful. Yo, shout out to Chromatics, yo. emcee out of Trinidad. He showed me around when I went there a couple years back, but beautiful. But
yeah, definitely.
Go ahead, Legacy.
That's where the family's from. You know what I'm saying? My pops is from Belmont, and my mom's is from Levantine in Trini. So they came here. Like I said, I was born in Brooklyn, then moved to Queens when I was about 6, and basically spent most of my childhood. I grew up in Queens.
Yo, shout out to Queens.
You know what I'm saying? Jamaica, Hollis,
the
Queens
building.
Village,
You're in Hip Hop Holy Land, yo.
Hip Hop Holy Land. We have a whole show on that. And from there, I moved to Long Island. Stayed a few years out there. And then I moved to the Bronx, where I reside now.
Shout out to the BX. That's my stomping grounds, my second home. Shout out to Kingsbridge, yo.
You know what I'm saying? But a young legacy, it's funny because that question actually fits. It's very apropos to what's on my shelf, what I'm going to share with you tonight. But I think for me, you know, I was like any New York City kid coming up. I was, you know, very much into hip hop, breakdancing. Started emceeing when I was maybe 12, and you know, it's still something I do today. But you know, I'm not trying to get a record deal or nothing, but it's more a hobby and you know, stress relief. It's a release. You know what I'm saying? I like to be artistic and things like that. So, very much into hip hop back then. But, you know, young, ignorant to a certain extent. Growing up, you know, especially coming from certain, you know, neighborhoods and being around our peoples, you think, you know, you're supposed to act a certain way coming up in the hood and things like that. And, you know, not until you get older that you realize that, you know, that's not the way it's supposed to be. It's actually detrimental to your well-being and your spirituality and your health and whatnot.
Speak on it.
So, but you know, it was a while before I, you know, was able to realize that. But, you know, I think, you know, what helped to shape me as the individual and person that I am today, you know, hip hop played a big part in that. You know, I came up in the 80s. So I grew up on, you know, Public Enemy, KRS-One,
legends,
Poor Righteous Teachers,
Oof.
You know, into the 90s, Brand Nubian, X-Clan.
What?
So these were all the people or the groups and artists that I think helped to shape me as the person that I am. You know, I like to consider myself a revolutionary, you know, militant, and you know, that helped to shape me. You know, Public Enemy, you know, Chuck D's to me a superhero. You know what I'm saying? X-Clan shared knowledge that I didn't even know existed, as far as, you know, our connection to Africa and that whole essence and spirituality. And so, you know, like I said, was just like any other kid growing up, but I think from my surroundings, my background coming from West Indian, I saw a lot of different things growing up, and I was fortunate enough to know people from all walks of life, because I grew up in it was a mixed neighborhood. It was predominantly white, but it was mixed. So I grew up around, I had white homeboys who were headbangers and listened to heavy metal and stuff like that. I grew up around a lot of West Indian people, mostly actually Haitian and Trinidadian. Like some of my closest friends are Haitian, so
shout out to my Haiti, sapase, as we say.
My and all that. With that, I started to, and I also had friends who were, Black American.
Yeah.
And I, started to notice the difference in how we were being brought up.
How old were you when you came here to the?
Well, I was born.
You said you were 12, correct? Oh no, you were born here, correct?
When I was like 6 when I moved to Queens from Brooklyn.
Okay.
And then from there I moved to Long Island when I was like 17 or 18, and then from there I moved to the Bronx, where I am now. But like I said, that upbringing, being around so many different people, I got to see a lot of different cultures, and I was able to to start to understand myself a little bit through understanding other people and having different vantage points and different points of view. And I think that helped me to be, sort of a more well-rounded person as far as, socially interacting with people. I knew people who, went to school every day, had jobs, good family life, that type of thing. And I also had friends that, had to hustle. That, came from broken homes or, that type of thing. So I was able to see, sort of all aspects of life. And, when you're growing up, you think the way you grow up is how everybody lived. And then when I started going over to my friend's house and seeing certain things and, starting to understand and grasp the things that I had that, I took for granted. You know what I'm saying? I knew kids who didn't, eat every day or didn't know where their next meal was coming from.
Right.
Or, a parent was an alcoholic, or, they abused drugs and how they dealt with that. And it wasn't, it's not until in retrospect, looking back, you see how going through different trauma, how people dealt with it and why they acted a certain way or why they behaved a certain way. And, it was enlightening. So, I'm grateful for that type of upbringing that I had. My parents weren't, they weren't racist. They didn't raise me to be racist, to hate white people or anything like that. They did tell me that I would have a harder life being black. But I was never taught to hate white people.
This is, it's, again, like I'm not surprised I'm hearing all this, and I'm gonna share this why. Tell you why, because as I tell folks that I invite here, right, like I know legacy, but I don't know no legacy, right?
Right.
And I only know what I see and what people tell me, right? And I always, I'm very observant. I get it from my mom, like, and I think that's just a hood thing, right? We observe. We're very, you got to look at your boundaries and you got to feel out the room, the temperature of the room. Right. But I see a lot of you in me because, like, I'm from the hood, and I love it, and I'll never not marginalize that, both literally and figuratively, because it's a part of who I am, and I don't want to hide it for no one.
Right.
But I was very grateful to grow up with my parents. I had a lot of faith and because we both have first generation, or some would say second. I think we're first because our parents came here, right? And I'm an 80s baby, and there was always I always tell people, like, when I stepped outside of my house, it was a totally different world. And I really had to wrestle with that internally. because I know two different legacies. I know a legacy that's, hip hop and street and does, the talking, but I also know a legacy that works in the health field, and that's the path that you took.
Right.
And I want to get into that conversation because we're both discussing similar realities from, coming from the hood, and we never really have the conversation of the trauma, I tell people I struggle with survivor's guilt because of a lot of the craziness I seen happen in life. But I'm thankful to have that anchor, to have the moral compass of faith, and my parents who are still married to this day. Thank God. Shout out to mom and dad, Aida and Facundo, aka my dad. And I think that's a lot of the connection that we have, which makes us kind of walk cordially, like very mindful. Right. Where's this like attuneness come from? Is it, because I do see this parallelism with us. Because there's a lot of things that we do creatively that is also intersects our lives. Right.
That's a good question. I don't know. I think it's just a part of who I am. My character.
Your DNA.
Yeah, exactly. It's a part of my DNA. And it's funny that you say you're very observant. Because when I was, I can remember some of my earliest memories as a child. I used to love when my parents would have a party at the house, because I would be able to sit in the corner and just watch people, and I really enjoyed that. And you know how they say, because we all have to toot our own horn a little bit sometimes.
Yep.
They say that everybody has genius level talent. You just have to figure it out. One of my genius level talents is I know how to read people from observing them, because I've been doing it since I was a little kid, since I was like 2 years old. Like literally, some of my earliest memories are of that. And going into, when I went to college, I got my degree in psychology, and then working in.
Where'd you study, Legacy?
I went to SUNY Old Westbury.
Shout out to SUNY, yo.
SUNY Old Westbury.
And psychology, big up, yo, because I never forget. I had to take psych 101 and 2. I was a criminal justice poli-sci. And psychology was one of the hardest classes I ever took. Really? But I shout out to people that helped me. And I ended up passing. I think I got like a B+ or something. But yo, shout out to the therapists, clinicians, social workers, because I am fascinated with psychology, yo.
I hear you.
If we want to talk about knowing thyself,
for real,
man, listen.
Exactly.
Please proceed, yo.
Yeah. So I think a combination of all of that kind of stuff, and my experience, and like I said, being part of who I am keeps me in tune with all that type of stuff. And going back to my childhood, I went to Catholic grammar school and high school, and I always felt like religion was being forced on me, and I didn't like that. And that pushed me away from it. So now, we interject hip hop, where I'm listening to X-Clan talk about Africa and motherland, and I'm listening to Poor Righteous Teachers and Brand Nubian. So that made me want to read. And if I said to myself, this what's been presented to me, Jesus and Catholicism, I don't believe that. What is the truth? So that's what sort of prompted me to search for the truth, start to read a lot, and I would look at groups like Brand Nubian or Because back then in hip hop, it was more of a conscious aspect to the music and the culture. You know, 5%ers in the Nation of Islam was a lot more prominent in the music than it is now. Some of the messages and imagery. And I would see all of that back then, and I didn't understand what it meant.
Right.
And I wanted to understand, so I would read about it. You know, what would the symbols, what would the medallions mean, and peace guard, what did that mean? So that sort of put me on the path to grow to be the type of person that I am now. And now I understand, and I can say affirmatively that attuneness is a part of my DNA, because it's always been there. I've always been the type of person to question, well, why? Why is this? Why is that? I want to know how everything works. When I was a kid, you know, I remember I took apart the television in the living room because I wanted to know, how does this work? You know, so that was the type of person. My mind was very inquisitive, so I always wanted to know, always want knowledge. So that kind of put me on the path to the person that I am today. You know, and when we, you know, get into that specific question about what, you know, did I take for myself to bring here to talk about, you know, I'll expound more on the significance of that.
But it's not really surprising to me that you took the psychology route, because, you know, there's a thin line there. I almost thought, like, why didn't I take psychology before and just go more in depth? But I ended up doing more informal training later down the route. But, you know, sociology is my background. Particularly, you know, graduating and my post-grad work, really a lot more. But, you know, it's part of the social sciences of really looking at behavior. And we were talking about this, particularly in the realm of COVID and what's going on. I know a legacy also that works in the health field. We know that the health field, they are the first responders. They continue to be, you know,
Right.
And we continue to undergo this situation. I mean, you know, we release this stuff like months after the fact, so the scenario might look different because things are constantly, you know, changing really rapidly.
Right.
But at this point, I think still the conversation is going to come up about vaccination, you know. But I want to step back in this because we've had conversations about this, including even off camera. When people have asked me about COVID, particularly when this thing was growing, my initial response would always be, well, what's your health looking like? Like, what are you eating? You know what I'm saying? What preventative measures?
Right.
Then let's go a little step further. The mental piece. You know, do you love yourself? You know, we can go deeper with that.
Right.
But coming from the hood and experiencing, you know, that trauma, but also now, like we were talking off camera about the spike of depression, of the growth of people smoking more, and what's smoking because of stress, because to another way of release, right? Speak to us on the health tip with this. What are your thoughts on this?
Oh man,
where do we begin, right?
Where do we begin? So, you know, like you said, you know, I've had a career in healthcare. About 20 years I've worked as a hospital administrator, human resources. And it's kind of like somebody who works at a restaurant tells you don't go to a restaurant to eat.
Yeah, facts, correct.
I've worked in a hospital, and I'm telling y'all, don't go to a hospital, because I've seen some shit. And, you know, on the side where I got to clean up a mess. So I know what I'm talking about. But, I think, so when all this started to happen, you know, again, my inquisitive mind, and, you know, I don't believe everything that's out in the media that I read or see or whatnot. I want to do my own research. So, having access to people who work in healthcare, as you said, first responders, I spoke to ER nurses, I spoke to respiratory therapists that would deal with a patient who had respiratory issues from COVID.
Right.
So I got varying answers from them. One of the consistent things that folks said was that it's not a pandemic like it's being presented to us. It's not as hospitals aren't being overrun. There's not really a shortage of supplies like they're making it out to be. There was a shortage of protective gear, which I thought was interesting. Not to treat the COVID once you got it and came in, but the protective gear. A lot of nurses told me they had to go out and actually get their own protective gear. So, you can speculate on that.
Which posits the question of, and given the fact that we're going on a year plus with this soon, and, when by the time this comes out, that, probably the reason this spread a lot was because of the first responders would have to go back to their homes, and and so it was just this ongoing cycle. And I say that because then in the education field, that's my little territory, right, so to speak, is that we restrict the young person but not the teacher. The teacher can still do what he or she pleases,
right?
So the fear is more on the side of the teacher, not necessarily the kid,
right?
Spreading this thing.
Yeah, and I know someone, a respiratory therapist, who actually caught COVID twice, taking care of people. So, you're absolutely right. They're right there. One of the other things that they said that was consistent was that physicians were misdiagnosing people to say that they had COVID. A couple people told me that they even I don't want to say falsify, for the lack of a better term, but they falsified, death certificates to say that this was COVID related when it really wasn't. So, again, all of this just raises questions, and it shows you that what comes out in the media is not always 100% accurate.
This trickles down not just with health, because I hate the term conspiracy. It's I think it's not conspiring. It's inquiry. You feel me?
Mm-hmm.
It's we have the right to question, to ask the why that you've been posing as a kid, that we all have as kids, because shout out to the Virgin Islands. I was there a little bit last month, and my experience coming back, they said the National Guard was gonna be there, to check, and not at any point when I was in the airport. This might be different now, but when I went, they never checked our temperature. When I got to VI, they were on us, on top of us. But when we got inland, particularly to New York, they didn't not even a temperature check. The guards weren't there, but they did do some tracing. They were able to get my information because I thought that. But anyways, but my point is, there's a lot of red flags. And I think we have the right to question everything now. I think there's one common thing that I'm seeing in the news is the fact that a lot of people are aware that there's a lot of misinformation out there. There's too many sources. Who do you rely on? What do you what's your go-to stuff?
I really don't have a particular place that I go to look. I go on the internet and read and stuff, but the way I gather information is I go to as many sources of information as possible and get the information, and then once I get it, I analyze it to see where's the consistent themes in the stories. if I read 5 different stories and there's 5 different things happening within the story, but within all 5 stories they say it's raining, then I know it was raining. What they were doing in that rain, I don't know, because it's 5 different accounts, so I know I gotta delve deeper. So for me, it's more so gathering as much information as possible. I try not to go the normal route. So for instance, I don't use Google to look up things. I use a search engine that's called DuckDuckGo.
Okay.
If you go on there, it'll give you a much wider variety of hits on the topic that you're looking for, and they don't track what you're looking at. So when you go into Google now, if you go to search something, all your previous searches are going to come up.
Facts.
DuckDuckGo doesn't do that. So
so it doesn't create a paper trail where it gives you to. In other words, like Google used that as an opportunity, ads and like take you here and et cetera, et cetera.
So I try to use not the mainstream sources of information, and and I just observe and I watch. I think the internet is good and bad. It's good in that there's a wealth of information out there, but it's bad in the sense that there's a lot of false information that's being put out.
And we talked about this in your podcast.
Yeah.
The Conversation.
Yes.
Talk to us about that.
The Conversation.
Yes, sir.
So, The Conversation is a podcast that I started about a year or so ago. And as you know, prior to that, I was on an internet radio show called Decipher.
Shout out to Decipher. Yes.
Shout out to Decipher, 13 and the whole team over there. That show was on for a good 10 years, 10, 11 years.
And talk to us about the Decipher. My bad, I jumped the gun because Decipher is an important piece because that's the evolution of legacy.
Right. So
speaking of observation,
very, very, very attuned to that. So the Decipher show was an internet radio show. Like I said, we were on for about 10, 11 years, and it focused on the hip hop culture, not just the music, but also fashion and everything that comes with the industry.
I want to pause real quick because we talk about in the culture giving the flowers to people while they're still alive. I want to give mad flowers to the Cypher show because you want to talk about the template or predecessor to this podcast thing, these conversations. Y'all been doing this.
I don't want to toot our home.
You know what I'm saying? But we got to do it. We got to say that, recognize that.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
Coming out of the echoes of Brooklyn, right there. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Shout out to DTF Radio. That's where we were. That was the radio station.
Yep.
And it was, again, I don't want to pat us on the back, but I do feel that show was very influential. It was very groundbreaking. We had a lot of stars that came to be stars later on passed through that show.
Can you just give us just a little bit, just to hit them in the dome with this police legacy?
So, Action Bronson. I don't know if you're
facts.
That. If you're not,
shout out to Queens.
Queens emcee is very dope. And not only on the music tip, we had a comedian named Damian Lemon. If you're familiar with MTV2's what was it, The Man Show?
Oh yeah, yep.
I don't know if that's the name, but it was something along those lines. He was one of the featured comedians on that show. It was a series. We had actually one of Rick Ross's artists. He goes by the name of Stally. He's not as big as Ross, but he's under his camp. We had Big Pun's son, Chris Rivers, and we had
lyrical monster.
Yeah, to see what he's doing now is phenomenal. Yeah. We had Pun's wife. We had I'll Be Back. He was an actor in the movie ATL with T.I. And he's been in a few other things. So we've had people come through, and I like to think that we did create the template for what people are doing. Even now, like, you know, I'll step out on a limb and I'll say that Drink Champs or Drunk Champs, whatever that show's called, that was the cipher. You know what I mean?
Super facts. Because y'all were drinking, having your little thing on too.
We always used to say, Diddy, you need to come cut our check for Ciroc because we. Oh, by the way, we had one of Diddy's producers on the show before.
Dope.
So, but yeah, that, you know, Drink Champs, that's us. We did that. So from there on the Cypher show, we used to do segments, and one of the segments that I had was the news. So I would do the news every week, and you know, every so often I would do a topic that's in the news, but more so on the quote-unquote conspiracy tip, the metaphysical tip. And I started to notice, though, when I would bring it up, the people in the room roll their eyes like, oh shit, here he go again with it. You know what I'm saying? But
it's interesting.
People, like the guests that we had on the show, would come up to me afterwards and be like, yo, I was just talking to my man about that the other day, this and that. And we would talk and build for like hours after the show off that tip. And I realized that, you know, everything I say or everything I bring up is not for everybody, but it resonates with certain people.
Facts.
And, you know, somebody said to me, they were like, why don't you do your own show with those type of topics? And I was like, nah, you know, I'm here. I was thinking to myself, I'm doing the Cypher, you know, I'm passionate about this, you know. And, you know, as an aside, that speaks to, you know, taking a risk to do something when you're not familiar with it. It could be a scary thing. So slowly but surely, I started to see that I was growing and I wanted to do more, but outside of the space of the Cypher. So I decided, you know, I'll leave doing that show and start doing this, something I call the conversation. And it's very similar to what you do here. It is simply just a conversation. Like I started last year. Some of the topics on the shows that I had for the first season were on mental health in the Black and Latino community. I had big. Yeah, I had two black psychologists on the show to talk about real issues, and some of the things that they said to this day astounded me because, so for instance, only 2% of psychologists are black males.
Yeah, that's a fact.
2%.
That's a fact. Yeah.
When you think about the trauma that our people have to deal with, and having to go to a clinician, get past the stigma of seeking mental health or help for mental issues. We don't do that. You know what I'm saying? So we touched on that stigma, but the apprehension that people have going to see a clinician also is around seeing a clinician who's culturally competent, who's gonna understand. Like I have a friend who he's Puerto Rican, and he went to a psychologist. He was abused as a child, like physically abused, and he said that when he was talking to the psychologist and telling him about his life, the guy didn't know what to do. The psychologist didn't know what to do. He had to actually call like one of his colleagues or mentor or someone to try to get some insight into what he was talking about, the type of abuse he received, because it was something so foreign to what he was used to. So just imagine going through what some of us have gone through, the trauma that's still there, and then going to a clinician who doesn't understand or who can't relate.
And that speaks to a lot of even in the school systems, that that there is a cultural disconnect too, and there's so much intersectionality again to the social sciences that are needed in order for us to be vulnerable like that.
Exactly.
Because a lot of times we need a mirror image of somebody who has gone through it and has survived and can speak to the other side of the, you know what I'm saying, of that dark tunnel.
That's exactly.
And it's so interesting to hear you know, say this. But, you know, I'm totally going left with this because I forgot to ask you, where do you get the name Legacy from? You know?
Oh. So, it goes back to, you know, my rapper days at emcee. The full name is Legacy Starr. And, you know, to be honest with you, I picked the name initially because I liked the way it sounded, right? But I started to really think about it and you know, I would say to myself, what is a legacy? It's something that, you know, you leave behind. And for me, I wanted to leave something behind to be inspirational and motivational. So legacy and star, to shine. So, you know, what I would say in my rhymes, legacy star is also synonymous with forever shine. Legacy is something that could be forever, and the star shines. So again, I picked it because I liked how it sounded, but I picked it for a reason, not even knowing that I was picking it for a reason. Because again, that's who, it's part of my DNA. I'm attuned to think those types of things and have that sort of mindset. So that was, you know, why I picked the name, and it's sort of, I sort of grew into it and the meaning behind it, and you know, that's sort of how it came to be. And it's actually, you know, I'm glad you brought that up, because my show, I call it, it's the conversation with Roger A. Franco, which is my government name.
That's a fact.
And I did that purposely. It's actually through discussions I had with 13 when I was telling him about my idea for the show. And I wanted to sort of show a transition from that guy, Legacy, that everybody knows is hip hop and talks that talk and, you know, all of that, to now someone wearing a suit, like when I do the show and stuff like that. Because I want to show people, us, that you can change, you can be different and still be down. You know what I'm saying? Like, nobody lost respect for me because I wore a suit on a show. They even, you know, it was the complete opposite. They looked at, oh, what is he doing, big time? You know what I'm saying? Like, why are you rocking a suit? And then I explain it to people, and they like, and many people have told me, like, this is what you're supposed to be doing. You know, this show is you. So I wanted to be, you know, part of the reason I do the show is to inspire, is to motivate, is to have these types of discussions. And if you can see, and, you know, this comes from the psychology, you can be what you see. You know, so if I see, you know, it's the same thing, like, in our
Speak on it.
In certain environments, if you saw businessmen going to work every day, rocking a nice suit, jumping in a nice car, driving off, you know what I'm saying, have a nice home and this and that, if you came up in that environment, then that's what you would aspire to be. Like, I rocked a suit because my father rocked a suit when he was going to work. That's what I saw. You know what I'm saying? Whereas in most cases, you see who's successful in the hood, the gold chains, the jewelry, the money, the cars, and all of that, and you emulate that because you think that that's success. So again, I want to show people that you could be different. Like, I could be down. You know, I'm still hip hop to my last days, but there's more to me. You can grow. You can be another person. You don't have to be stuck and being one way. And I think for us, for our people, we get stuck because we don't know how to be any other way. You know, like I was watching this thing with the rapper Game. He was being interviewed, and he was talking about moving out of the hood and stuff like that. And he was like, initially, after he became famous and everything, he still didn't want to leave the hood because it was something familiar to him. He was comfortable there, even though it was drugs and, you know, gangs and shootings and all of that. He wanted to stay there because he couldn't see himself living in Beverly Hills, or, you know what I'm saying? This is not my world. I don't belong there.
Right.
So he didn't see himself there. And I thought this was so, it wasn't funny, but I was like, I didn't understand it at first. He said the day he realized he needed to move was that he was walking outside his house. One of his enemies from a rival gang saw him and started shooting an AK-47 at him. And after it was all said and done, you know, his car got shot up, and then he looked in the back seat, and his son's child seat was there, and there was a bullet hole where his son's head would have been. And I'm thinking to myself, damn, that's what it took for you to realize that you should have moved out of that neighborhood. Right. But again, taking a step back and not being judgmental, I started to think, well, let me think of it from his vantage point, his perspective. And that's why I say, for some of us, we can only be what we see ourselves being. If I can't see myself, you know, having a 9-to-5 job and wearing a suit, then I'm not going to aspire to be that because I can't visualize that in my head. And I think that's, you know, something that, you know, we as a people gotta work on.
I can't, like, that's a lot to unpackage because you know, we talk a lot about here about entrepreneurship, about purpose, and, you know, we talk a lot about that as well. Like, why am I here in this planet? You know, and a lot of times we need to see in order to believe, and the closest thing to us is the closest thing that we do have to a role model or a therapist or psychologist, etc. Right? As someone who has evolved, been working in the health field, has gone through this journey, what would you say to that person that is struggling, coming from the hood? Legacy. What's that message or advice you would give to that person? You know.
I think, you know, no matter how bad things look today or how much you struggle, there's always a brighter day tomorrow. There's change. You know what I'm saying? And I think that person needs to understand that, you know, things are not going to be the same forever. You know, there is hope. And I think that's an important thing, to have hope as opposed to living in despair and hopelessness. And I think you got to be able to trust yourself going through these difficult times. You will get through it. You know, like I said, everything changes. You know, nothing is ever as bad as it seems, and it'll pass. To stay focused on your goal and your dream. I think it's important to have dreams. For people to, it's all right to not want to. If you don't want a 9-to-5 or, you know, wear a suit every day, that's fine. But, you know, what is it that you're passionate about? And I think we've been sort of conditioned to not follow our dreams and not be, you know, follow our passion. And I think that's where, you know, we fall off the track. Excuse me. I think stay focused on your dreams and your aspirations, and, you know, understand hard work does pay off. And
speak on it.
You know, there's always, you know, there's always a way out. You know, people like to say, you know, I didn't have no choice, or, you know, whatnot. You do have a choice. You may not want to deal with the consequences of that choice, but, you know, it's there. And I think, you know, and I'm a firm believer that, you know, adversity helps to build character. You know, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And,
speak on it.
and I think people need to understand that. Like, you know, I believe there's meaning and truth in everything. If you put the time in, you put the work in, you know, you'll only get what you put into it.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I do believe all things are possible as long as you know, have the right intention and you put the work and whatnot behind it. So I think, you know, and I know it's difficult. It's easier said than done, but to stay focused and to have a dream, and it's all right to have a dream and to be passionate about something, and, you know, not to let people deter you. And it, you know, it could be a lonely road, because it might even be people who are close to you that won't support you, who tell you not to do something, or even see that you're ambitious and trying to get ahead, and you know, it makes them feel a way about themselves. So, you know, just stay focused. Have faith in something. You know what I'm saying? And, you know, believe. That's a big piece. Believe that it can happen, and it will happen. The only obstacle in your way is yourself. You know, we're not, you know, my philosophy is I'm not in competition with anybody. I have no enemies. Any enemies are the ones that I create myself. And I
speak on it.
My greatest enemy, you know. You know, strive to be better than the person you were yesterday. You know, nobody's perfect, but you can strive for excellence. And if you do that, you won't fall short of greatness.
Speak on it. You know, like, oh nah, it's part-time preacher. Let me find out.
Nah, I mean, it might sound corny to some, but it's something I truly do believe in it. And my whole, you know, my life and my experience in life has shown me that. And, you know, I try to look at everything, the good and the bad, especially the bad. All right, what can I learn from this? You know, not to sit and you know, wallow in self-pity and all of this. Bad things are gonna happen. That is life. You know, you're not gonna go through life, you know, it's not all, you know, roses and whatnot.
Super facts. Roller coaster ride, family.
You know, you gotta take the good with the bad. And, you know, over these past few years, I've taken a couple losses. You know what I'm saying? And I've come out better person on the other side of it all. And that's even empowering and helps to sort of lift your spirit. Because you can see that you can get through certain things. And I believe everything happens for a reason. There's truth in everything. You just got to understand why, you know, everything has happened to you. And use it for the better. You know, be that good person who's learned from their mistakes and sort of impart that onto other people, because that type of stuff is infectious. You know what I'm saying?
As opposed to the other infection.
Right. You know what I'm
spread that way. How about
exactly.
that? Yeah, beautiful. I'm loving this. So I want to switch gears, because, you know, we can go in and go deep. And as we always do in the Know That Show podcast, we invite guests to bring something from their shelf. Yo, what you got for us, King?
So, from my shelf, I feel like this is show and tell.
Like back in school.
You know what I'm saying? But this sort of ties back into, you know, what I was speaking about earlier, as far as sort of finding myself. So, what I have here is a book. It's called Before the Mayflower. It was written by... Do you have that?
Does this... History of Black America, the classic account of the struggles and triumphs of Black Americans by Laurent Bet. This sounds familiar. Yo, check this out, family, right here. Please.
Yeah.
But I know, just by the title, I know. But
yeah.
Go ahead.
So, I got this book in my freshman year in college. I was taking an African American Studies course, and this is one of the books we read. And I mean, it has a wealth of information and knowledge in it in regard to, you know, our history in Africa prior to slavery, during slavery, and then after slavery in this country. So it gives you a lot of history. It gives you the correct narrative of the institution of slavery. You know, one of the things that were very impactful in this book when it speaks about the slave rebellions, like it mentions Nat Turner, but if you believe the narrative from the European aspect, it was something that slavery was something that we sort of laid down and accepted, and that we didn't fight for. No, there were hundreds, if not thousands, of rebellions throughout the time of the institution of slavery. So yes. That sort of chronicles it. It's chronicled here in this book, but why this book is so meaningful to me is because not only the information that's in it, but what it represents at a particular time in my life when I had it. So, like I said, when I was younger and I would question all these things and into hip hop and Public Enemy and all that type of stuff, I started to read a lot. And I read a lot about Africa and Egypt and Kush and Nubia and whatnot. And I really started to get knowledge of self. And, you know, when you get knowledge of self, you also get knowledge of who everyone else is. So that further piqued my interest to read a lot more about religion, the different religions. I started to read the Quran to understand Islam. I even took a course on Islam. And at this time in New York, you know, this is like, go to the city in 34th Street and really all over the city in Brooklyn and Queens, the guards would be out and they would be preaching and talking on the streets, and they had books. And
shout out to the gods and earths.
Big up to the 5% in the Nation of Islam. So they had a lot of books, and I would buy the books and I would read them and read them and read them. And then I started to read about, you know, the government and COINTELPRO and the Black Power movement and all of that stuff. But this book is representative of that time, sort of me becoming enlightened and gaining knowledge and experience and starting to see the world differently, and started seeing it for what it was as opposed to what I thought it was. And so I always kept this book, and you know, I've read it over a couple times because each time I read it I get something different out of it.
So it's doing its job.
Yeah, and you know, it really reinforces for me the power of reading and how it really helps to exercise your mind and helps to broaden your state of mind and how you think and experience things. So that's why, you know, this is something off of my shelf that I think, you know, sort of is the gateway into who I've sort of become, and doing the show, the conversation, to touch on the different topics that you know, I discuss. And you know, when all of this stuff started happening with COVID, and then with the situation with the police, with George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and the countless others, I was sort of torn and was like, what do I do? You know, I wanted to be sort of out there on the front lines and whatnot. But I wanted to be impactful. You know, I want to sort of resonate with people, and that's really why, even more so, I do my show now, because that's sort of my role as I see it. I'm not into protesting, you know, marching and all of that. To me, no offense to anybody who's into that and who's done it, I think it needs to be done.
No doubt.
But for me, I need something more outside of that, because, you know, I'm also big on history, and if you look at history, that hasn't really had the impact that it should have. And you know, things happen, and we march and we march and we protest, and then the issue dies down until the next thing happens.
Facts.
You know? So
Facts.
I want my show to be an opportunity, just like this, your show, for people to come and have discussions about things that are impacting our communities. And you know, honestly, it's not just Black and Latino thing. It's a universal thing. You know, it's people. You know what I mean? And the same, you know, issues that we're dealing with, others are dealing with as well. Maybe not to the scale that we are, but we're experiencing it. And you know, it works in the favor of the people in power to keep us all divided, to keep us all separated, to keep us all fighting about he's black, he's white, she's trans, and this one and that one and all of that, because there's more of us than there is of them. And until we realize that, the world is going to stay the way it is, because why would it change? You know, so I'm trying to get people to understand that. I try not to get too crazy with the topics that possibly turn people off. So you know, that's, you know, for show and tell.
No doubt. And I think, you know, I'm loving this and I'm digesting this, because I always tell my students, man, you know, how do I know myself? I'm trying to like get to know who I am. How do I do that? And I always say, you want to know how? Get lost. They're like, what? What do you mean? What do you mean? I'm like, get lost. Get lost in the world. Get lost in them books. Get lost with people that don't look like you, talk like you. Because for me, you know, first of all, every human being for me is a reflection of the divine. The God. You understand? So I think it's important that, you know, in that search of knowing thyself is, you know, knowing other people. To know that we're not in a vacuum. Exactly. And I'm proud of you, my dude. The fact that you're continuing the conversation, because I'm not about that protest life, and I've spoken about this, etc. But we all can play a part, because we all have gifts and talents that I really believe the God gives to us. And we got a short time to get it together, because life goes like this. You understand? So, as we always do in the Know Thyself podcast, my brother, is we end with a quote. But I definitely want to say that I'm proud of you.
Thank you.
Keep speaking truth. Where can people, if they want to link with you and go check out your show, where do they go? What's the information?
You could go to my Instagram page. It's Legacy Starr with 2 R's. It's all one word. If you want to go check me on Facebook, it's my government, Roger Franco. If you go to my IG page, you'll get information on my YouTube channel. It's called The Conversation Podcast. You can go there and see some of the shows I've done for this season, season 2. I'm in the process of getting the other videos from season 1 and putting them up there. And just to give you also a flavor of some of the other topics, like I said, I did mental health, but I also did one on how to create generational wealth.
Super neat.
Investing,
yes.
Real estate, spirituality. We did one on social media and spirituality. I've done ones on relationships. So I mentioned that to say, if any of you out there would like to be a part of it, who, you know, you don't have to be a scientist or anybody, you know, just be a thoughtful, you know, person. Reach out and definitely let's have a conversation. It's Legacy Starr with 2 R's, one word on Instagram, and then Roger Franco on Facebook.
Word. Definitely check out the convo. Let's keep the convo going. And yeah, let's get into this quote, which I believe really speaks to you, my brother. Us, this time. And it comes from your boy, Deepak Chopra, right? And it reads as such. Walk with those seeking truth. Run from those who think they found it. Peace, family.